Hey guys, it is Brian Hilliard here, author of the best-selling book, Networking Like a Pro, and creator of the popular program, How to Start Getting Paid Speaking Engagements. Now, we have got ourselves a treat here today. We are here with James Carson. He is a speaker, coach, educator, teacher, not a teacher, but teaches you do some certain things. And we are really going to have a great conversation. James talks a lot about finding your voice. So if you are somebody who maybe is a little bit on the shy side and you're thinking to yourself, well, you know what, I'd love to be able to do some more public speaking, but I'm not really sure how to do that. How can I find my own voice to be successful in this? Then Mr. James Carson, hailing from South Carolina via Georgia, is your man today. James, thanks so much for coming on board.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. And yes, I've been over South Carolina now after 70 some odd years in Georgia. So it's a new move for me.
That is awesome. I'm from North Carolina. I got that whole North and South thing going on. But originally, I actually spent about 17 years in Georgia as well. That's how we met, real quick. We met through a mutual acquaintance that we had in Georgia, in Atlanta, and worked on LinkedIn. And, I think it's been a great relationship. So we've got some we've got some good stuff going on. Okay, listen, so here's the thing. Let me jump right into the crux of the matter here. We've got some people who are listening who maybe want to go out and do some speaking, or maybe they want to get on camera, or maybe they want to just kind of get out there a little bit more. But here's the problem. They are not the most outgoing of people. They are, maybe they would even describe themselves as an introvert. And the issue, though, is in order to be successful in business as a coach, people need to know you exist. And speaking is one of those ways. So talk to us about just the business case, for lack of a better term, for someone who might not be the most extroverted person in the world. But what's the business case for getting out there and doing speaking versus staying at home and hoping that people come?
Good point. What I've found in my years of teaching and being involved with folks who are communicating in business, it's, some odd 20 years or more in the business world, the folks that need to speak don't have their best voice in front of them, as I like to say, because they've never had to, and they've never learned what they need to do to make this happen.
Right.
It's the type thing where folks have said, okay, I carry on a conversation in business all the time, but then you're asked to speak in front of a group, a small group, big group, one-on-one client, and they go, I don't know how to do this. This scares the heck out of me.
Right.
Well, a lot of that fear to me is they don't know how. It's not necessarily the fact that they can't. They've just never been taught how. They've never had to. And so a lot of that is they just don't know what they need to be doing. Yes, they are introverted, they're shy, or they could be just afraid, but those are little things that turn into big things as they go down the road, and it kind of blocks folks out, and they never get to what I call using their best voice.
And as a result of that, they're playing, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but they're playing small.
Yeah.
Again, not disrespecting, not trying to disrespect anybody, but there's a smallness that comes out because as a coach, you're not letting people know that you're out there. You know what I mean? And not being able to do that. So I think part of it too is getting out there. And then I think another part, and you talked about this, you tell me what you think about it. I just thought of this, which is, what do you think about the idea that people who are less extroverted might have a preconceived notion of what it means to be a speaker, and that preconceived notion, because it doesn't jibe with what they feel they are, they have kind of thrown the whole baby out with the bathwater, versus maybe re-examining the premise and because you talk about using your own voice, you talk about stories, we'll talk about that. So they have this idea of what they think it means to be a speaker. They then say, I'm not that. They then don't do it. They then play small. What do you think about that idea? And if you want to push back, that's fine. I just thought about that.
No, and I agree with that. So many people say, I am just afraid, or they may not use the word afraid, but uncomfortable, really anxious, really nervous when I even have to consider speaking in front of a group. Well, they don't realize they speak in front of groups all the time, but what their business aspects, it's all based on preconceived notions, or as I say, preconceived mindsets. They think of this, I'm afraid, I'm anxious, I don't know how.
Right.
I'm not Tony Robbins, I'm not Brian Tracy, I'm not these big business folks who I've heard speak on podcasts and things like that, or I've seen them on videos. And because I'm not them, I don't have anything to say. Well, that's not it. If that mindset, in my opinion, can be tweaked just a little bit to get rid of these preconceived notions or ideas or thoughts and go, I'm not them. I'm never going to be them. I just need to be me and do my thing. Then that's the part that actually comes through for folks who can overcome these ideas.
Which I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say that's a perfect way, parlay into the point that you make about telling a story, right? So let me set this up for people so they know. So you're all about this idea of using your own voice, and part of, and I'll let you tell the story, but part of it is that people are thinking that a speech is this big thing, and that's intimidating. Conversely, you want to have a different conversation with them and say, listen, let me just work with you on telling your story in front of a crowd, which we'll call a speech. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that is so important.
Well, that's very true. And I have figured this out over the years, that telling your story is easy. And I say that very kind of lighthearted, but it's giving a speech can be very difficult in your mind. But if you get past that and go, well, I tell my kids a story every night before they go to sleep. I tell my friends a story when we're out socializing. So we're using stories every day, but I don't think we think about a story when it comes to giving a speech. I believe, and this is just me, that if you can tell your story, you can make a speech. We can put together your story by you just saying what you do, what you believe, how you feel, turn it into a 5-part speech, and you're off and running. That's simplistically, but it doesn't have to be difficult, because telling that story is something you know how to do.
Right. And a lot of people, I actually wrote this down here, and I'm going to read it real quick. It says, so many people in the speaking world and who are in business world, we're focused on the sales and marketing component of it, right? And the problem is that doesn't translate into speaking effectively. And that's, to your point, we talked about this before. That's how they come across as being anxious and kind of like this, that, and the other. The telling a story is an intrinsic part of who we are. And I think that you talk about a false premise. One of the false premises that people have is that speaking is this person that I need to step into. I need to be this Brian Tracy, Les Brown, Tony Robbins. I think you and I talked about this, Unleash the Power Within, Tony Robbins, a couple of weeks ago. Really, really good. But I don't know if that's really where I'm trying to go personally. Brian Hilliard, I do a lot of speaking. I wouldn't necessarily, no disrespect to Mr. Robbins, that's just not necessarily how I go about speaking. You know what I mean? But the idea is that everyone can, to your point, find their voice and find their authentic nature. What would be some steps that people could take? So if I'm thinking, oh, you know what, that's interesting, James. So I need to find my voice. You're telling me, fine. I need to tap into my story. what are some steps that they could take to move forward in that?
Well, one thing I think the folks need to understand is who are you talking to
Good
and
start.
on a regular basis. In other
Good
words,
start.
who's your audience?
Okay.
Is it the client that you go out and quote sell to? Is it your folks that you manage or work with every day? Or is
Good.
it those folks? I think that if you identify who your unique audience is, then you have an idea that everybody you're speaking to are not 5,000 people you've never seen or heard before.
Okay.
These are folks that you know. So that takes some pressure off,
It's a great start.
to be able to get started with that. So that's the first thing I would think.
Okay.
Secondly, is to be able to identify your story. In other words, what do you need to tell them? What message are you trying to convey? And again, it doesn't have to be a Tony Robbins, and I use Tony because he speaks to large crowds and he's folks that we know. But who do what is the message you're trying to give to your employees, to your folks that you see every day? Could be your family, could be a spouse, a partner, but who you're speaking to, and then what do you want them in that message as you tell your story? Build that message in, then it becomes a story with a message, which is, you can go back to biblical days, parables, but that's that idea of what you're trying to say in a story, and it converts to, your audience. And I think those are the simple three.
Yeah.
Is to be able to put it out there that's the simple part. You can tweak any of those things, and one thing that I'll say quickly is that I'm doing a course on what we're talking about right now.
Yeah,
And
we'll talk about that.
But one thing that I'm into right now in the recording aspect is telling a story. There's 5 parts. You have an introduction, you have 3 middle parts, then you have an ending. That's a speech. That's a story. That's a presentation. You just tweak what plugs in what needs to be done, and you practice that.
Right. Boy, what you like a lot of, I hope people heard all of that. Let's unpack that a second. First of all, the spiritual point. That is all Jesus did. He's always talking in parables. You take a look at that, you go back to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and that's all that guy was doing, talking in parables. Okay. Then you talk about some of the other things. If we're just going to go straight up Old Testament Proverbs, that's totally it. Okay. That is totally it. All right. Second point that you made, which is, this idea of Tony Robbins, or we need to be this, or we need to go there, or something like that. Absolutely. It's just being able to, one of the things I'm doing a workshop training on leadership. It's for a group down in Florida. Okay. And our first session, it's 12 sessions. Our first one was yesterday. And one of the things that I was previewing the class. And one of the things that I told them was, that as it's what do we call it? Next level leadership. And I said that, one of the things as a leader, there's this idea that you have to be this certain type of person. American idea, Western idea of what you need to be this leader. And that's not true. I said, what you have to do is you got to find some space in terms of what works best for you. So going back to that speaking piece, I think what you're saying is that the people themselves need to find some space inside of this overarching place that we're calling public speaking and make it your own?
Yes, and I call it your unique voice. Unique meaning it's yours. Okay. It's not Tony's, it's not Brian's, it's not James's. It's whoever, it's yours. And in that realm is you're actually not, you can call it public speaking. I call it speaking in public. I know that's a play in words, but the idea is we speak in public every day and never get on a stage with a spotlight and a big old audience.
Right.
99.9% of us will never, ever do that. You will, I might, but the point is the average, the average person, is not going to do that. And they shouldn't think about that. That's what they have to do. It's just not going to happen.
Right. No, that's so funny. I remember my first presentation. I started in '01, and my first presentation was so quick story, obviously. My first presentation was it was in Atlanta. It was the Sandy Springs. You'll remember this. I don't know if you remember Sandy Springs before it got incorporated, and they had a Sandy Springs library. Like it was a library.
Yeah.
And it was not that bigger than like my office, no disrespect, but it was not. Okay. And I was a part of a Kiwanis group. And it was a networking group. And one of the ladies knew I was a speaker, and her name was Jamie Colgan. And she says, Brian, listen, after we've been getting to know each other, she says, listen, the chamber, do you have any time free like May 10th? And this was like in whatever it was. And I said, yeah, why? Why do you ask? She's like, well, the chamber's looking for somebody to come in and speak. I told them maybe you would be interested. Jamie Hogan. I said, sure, yeah. I'm sure someone canceled because the chamber, knowing what I do now, like the chamber set this stuff up pretty regularly in advance. But okay. But I didn't know that at the time. So I'm going down to the presentation. I am like totally, I'm a little discombobulated, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to play my game. It's a half hour. My first presentation as a business owner, I'm going to play my game. So I went down there and I did it. I did a topic. I don't remember what it was. And at the end of the presentation, I remember thinking to myself, I was mad. I was a little PO'd because I didn't think I did a good job. I'm done. I'm thinking to myself, all right, let's pack up quickly so we can leave. I'm ready to go get something to eat because this didn't really go right. And people are coming up. So a couple people. What I took away was I thought that from the presentation, that the reason I didn't think it was right was because I thought that they were focused on what I was saying. And what I thought I was saying wasn't very good. It wasn't insightful. It just wasn't very good. I'm sure it was okay, but it wasn't very good. And I'm judging myself on that. You know what they were judging me on or looking at? Or they were looking at the energy, the delivery, how I came across. Was I authentic? Was I true? Wasn't it in alignment? Did they resonate?
And that's it. Yeah.
People were loving it. They're booking me for another stuff. So the reason I share this point with you, with the audience, is because it gets back to your point, which is we make a presentation a big deal in our own head, and it doesn't have to be. And I think what I'm hearing you say is we do this all the time, but we get so wrapped up into public speaking that we forget that we speak in public all the time.
Exactly. And that's a very good point on that. We get hung up on what we think they're hearing. And they are. I mean, they're hearing the content, they're hearing your words, they're hearing the wonderful things that we want them to hear because that's what we planned on. But they're looking at the package. They don't know you, so to speak. And then all of a sudden they're there and going, man, he was really great. And they probably couldn't tell you 5 sentences that you said in that 15 or 20 minutes, but it's not that they don't care, but they are interested in how you did it, the energy you put into the room, the energy any of us puts in the room,
Right.
Whether we're giving a Jesus parable or we're just excited about it. Tony Robbins, great energy and everything when he presents. James Carson's a little bit more low key. It's just who we are and how we do it.
Right.
But the point is, if everybody who is our audience is seeing that package in us, we may not be, like you said, really excited about what we did. We all have what we think are down days.
Right.
It's going to happen.
Right.
I have a story, the first presentation I ever did for this group that I was training for, and I was training all over the country. And the first one that I ever did had come on me real quick, kind of like you said. You think somebody might have quit the next day, and they said, "Here, you need to go do this in, in Lexington, Kentucky. You need to be there here." And I'm going, "Okay, fine." Well, I knew it was in my mind bad, and a couple of other folks, like they do, didn't give a great feedback. But the point was, I was so concerned about what I was doing. Maybe I didn't give the audience what they should have gotten and what they deserved because I was too wrapped up in me. It got better.
Right.
But that first time, we all have those issues that we have to deal with, as we speak in public.
That's exactly. I love that. I love that. Okay, listen, let's talk about this. We were talking about this off air, and and I love this. This is this idea that, so for those of you coaches who are listening, so far, one of the takeaways is we're speaking in public, not public speaking. Another takeaway, if you've been listening, in my opinion, is this is really a conversation of a mindset. This is a very much of an inside job. To be worried about. And then point number four, is that there are, what did you say, James, a 5-step deal that you had to be able to go through some of these different things. Okay, here's another point, number 5 maybe, which is one of the things we were talking about the other day was the role social media and cell phones have played in this whole level of feeling a little anxious, feeling a little bit whatever. One of the things that I tell people is I don't know, no disrespect, but I do not know if our younger compatriots understand that you have to actually live with and talk to the person that you eventually marry. Because the way that it seems like they're approaching it is they're so busy, no disrespect to anybody who's listening, this is a perspective, looking at their phone, replying back on text, hitting people up on TikTok, going over here on IG, that, I called somebody the other day and it was almost like I caught her off guard. She was great about it, but it was, you know what I mean? So let's talk about the role that social media, and let's talk about the role that cell phones and things like that, constantly looking down. I don't think that's doing anybody any favors, but I think it's perpetuating this degree of anxiety. What's your feeling on that?
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. I was checking a text here. I apologize for not getting I wholeheartedly, maybe that's it. You get that. And yes, I use my phone. I use social media. I'll just say that up front. However, you and I didn't start in our businesses with this type of phone. Computers were barely there. They were huge, but now everything's in your pocket. And how people, and I don't want to use the term young people, but I will, because that's as younger folks grow up, they're growing up with this device or any device. We grew up with, and I a little bit earlier than you, but we thought MTV was a big deal on cable.
I remember when cable was a big deal.
Right. Of course,
brass tacks.
Yeah, and of course, I remember the dialing the phone,
I do too.
But we can go back there, but it's gotten into habits,
right,
with these young folks and now older folks, because it's part of business. Text me, send me this, send me that. And I think it takes sometimes we just need to have a conversation with each other.
Right.
We need to communicate with the folks that we need to communicate with.
Right.
The relationship building is tough, I believe, when you're dealing with the phones. Yes, you can enhance your relationship, but building a relationship, dating someone, marrying someone, and it's be like marrying, like you said, marrying folks that you've never seen, in person. This is not TV, a reality show. You need to be able to communicate face to face, one-on-one,
Right.
to be successful. Then you can do follow-ups, on Zoom, or you can do it mainly. Zoom has become a tool that's being used in business. This has become part of what you and I are doing right here.
Yeah.
But, we're not doing it here. And we will communicate later on here, but I'm thinking that people are being more reliant on the device
Right.
that's in their hand,
Right.
as opposed to the device that's in their head.
I love that, because I also think that people are over reliant. I'll go a little bit further. I think they talk about the brain being a muscle, and they talk about different muscles, like if you don't use them, you lose them, right? And like, I think what's happened is that we've become so over reliant on certain things that we have a hard time being able to do certain things. And I think the way this relates back to speaking is, if I'm listening to this and I'm maybe a little bit more shy, or maybe a little bit more whatever, but I want to get out, maybe I pick up the phone a few more times and call somebody. Maybe that's a good first step. Maybe I'm not so much like, and I'm not trying to put anybody down. We're talking about moving forward. Maybe
Right.
I'm picking up the phone and first steps. Maybe I'm picking up the phone a little bit more often and calling people. Maybe I'm setting up some Zooms and having some face-to-face. Maybe I take away a little bit of that IG time for a half hour for the week. And you know what? It's not going to kill you. Like, maybe I do some of these things that are, because that put me in front of people, that actually put me in front of people. Because you're not, there's two things in life that are absolutely 100% doctrine. Number one, you don't win a war from the air. You have to have people on the ground.
On the ground, right.
Okay. You don't win a war from the air. Number two is you don't get anybody to buy through email. Oh, just email me. Oh, I promise you don't win a war from the air, and you don't get anybody to buy through email. So with those two things, we'll talk about the second one, since that's our purview today. You have to be willing to talk to people. And that's why, even doing, like, let's talk about this. What do you think, would you think a good first step also maybe for people to go out and speak would be to do some virtual presentations? What do you think about that? I didn't even think about that until just now.
I believe that is in today's world, technology, as good as it is, you and I have not, we may have years ago brushed against each other at a meeting in Atlanta 20 years ago, but most of because of our distance, and that's the good part about the Zooms and the virtual, it allows us to have a conversation with somebody in the UK. And I know we both talk to UK people all the time. Yeah. And that's part of that. And I think this is a good place to start, because you can be comfortable in a setting that you're with, and virtual is out there. I am a believer in that. I do most of what I'm doing right now. The majority is virtual. That doesn't mean I've never been out to talk to people and won't go. It just means that I can do it without having to drive to Charlotte or Atlanta or Greenville or wherever from this. It allows us to do that. But at some point, I think you need to have that experience of one-on-one speaking in person, if it's at all possible. Obviously, you can't jump in the car and drive to London, but you can still have that. I wish I could come see you and have a cup of tea or a pint or whatever with you, to have the relationship, because you built it that far.
That is awesome. Well, let me ask you one more question and then we'll finish up. which is this idea of stepping into your authentic voice. You talked a little bit about, you have a course coming up on that as well. Talk a little bit about what stepping into your authentic voice looks like, and talk a little bit about what the course is too, so people can get a feel for what it is that you're doing, if you don't mind, please.
I don't mind at all. Thanks for asking. Your Best Voice is the title, the broad title of where we're going. It's the parachute title.
Right.
And the tag under that is overcoming fears and anxieties of speaking in public by finding your best voice.
Right.
Now, your best voice, to some folks will go, well, I'm not a singer. You know, I'm not Adele. I'm not even Taylor Swift or any of these folks. I'm just not a singer. And they obviously use their best voice. Yeah. But again, now you're singling out somebody that you've heard of and somebody that you know is good. You know, what about Brian's best voice? And I'm going to, if I might use you as an example, because you just mentioned it, you were talking about that first speech.
Yeah.
You had you had your words, and what they got was, you know, your enthusiasm, your whatever that you gave. See, if you asked me and I heard that speech, I would say, well, Brian's best voice is his enthusiasm, his body language. And then I would say, and the words that came out of his mouth. It's the whole package. It's not just these words that may or may not come out of your mouth. It's how you present it. It's the message you give. And the idea is to work on this and practice all of these, practice until you can get to the point where you flip the switch. Your best voice comes out and you can do it. I do my best and have done it to teach these ideas in my course.
Okay.
And that's where it starts at the beginning, talking about fear and anxiety, where they come from and things like that. Then we move on through identifying audience, et cetera, et cetera. Then toward the end, we talk about the stories. And one word we don't have time to talk about, but using the theater in your mind.
I like that.
Visualization.
Good.
It is positive visualization where you envision yourself standing on the stage, giving the presentation, all in your mind. And it's positive. At the end, what I use is, after I finish this, I get the standing ovation. I get all of these positive. Sometimes I get a promotion. Most of the time I take the money, but it's always positive, so that all of it is positive, and you've used your best voice. Trying to make this, practice makes perfect. Well, perfect's not what we're after. We're after practice making you and your best voice. Is that whole principle that it comes together doing that and not have to stress it. But you've got to know how to shift the mindset and where to shift it.
I love that. Practice almost makes polished in this example, because you're polishing what you're already doing. And that's kind of your key premise.
Exactly.
Well, listen, James, this has been terrific. Tell us where some of these folks can either online or some places where they can catch up with you.
Yeah, a couple of places. You can send me an email if you choose at James@Common Sense Teaching. All three words jammed together, .com. CommonSenseTeaching.com, or you can go to LinkedIn.com/James R. Carson and direct message me.
Awesome. Well, listen, this has been a pleasure. We've been talking about this for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. And this has been exactly as advertised. I'm hoping that some of you guys who've been listening, who you're thinking, maybe I'm not the speaker, or I'm not this big name, or I'm not Brian, which you don't necessarily want to be.
Yeah.
But you find something that works for you. Okay. And let's go forward and move forward, because that's how you let others know about you and that they know you exist. All right. Listen, my name is Brian Hilliard. That's James Carson over there. We're saying thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.